Senator Mark Warner says changes are coming when it comes to regulating social media, but first, Congress has to get up to speed on technology issues. In an interview with CNET executive editor Ian Sherr, the Virginia Democrat warns that U.S. spending on defense does not focus on issues relating to cybersecurity. Listen.
If you add up all the money Russia spent in intervening in our election, from paid ads to paying folks who are the trolls to using their bots. If you add to that on top of that what happened in the the French elections. If you add on top of that as well, we've now had members of Parliament come over and say, "Oh my gosh, we didn't think so at first, but we're seeing all kinds of indication around the Brexit vote." You add all that together, and it's less than the cost of one new F-35 airplane. And we live in a world where the United States of America just put together just approved a $700 billion defense budget. Russia has a $68 billion defense budget. They've made the decision where they think 21st century conflict will be in misinformation, disinformation, and cyber. I fear sometimes that we're buying the world's best 20th century military in terms of tanks and ships and planes and guns, when conflict may have moved to a different realm.
For more on this, I want to bring in Anthony D'Agostino. He's the global head of cyber risk at Willis Towers Watson. Anthony, first, give us a sense of what it is you do and what it is you track, and what you make of Senator Warner's comments about funding these anti-cyber threat programs.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's something that we're very focused on. I mean, we're working with clients across the globe, organizations across the globe in all industries, and cybersecurity and privacy is extremely, extremely important. It's at the front of their minds. And there is an issue around spending. I mean, organizations in the private sector want to see more collaboration with the public sector, regardless of geography. And I think there are a number of governments that are doing more in that space and starting to spend a little bit more. There's always more to be had. I think some organizations, and especially some countries, are doing more to spend on the attacks and providing misinformation. But the executive order that Obama put into place, the executive order that Trump put into place, is giving us a step in the right direction to get focused more on defending our country.
Part of the issue, which was exposed this week when Mark Zuckerberg was talking to senators and congresspeople about the security issues of Facebook, is that most people on Capitol Hill don't really comprehend or understand how social media and nefarious acts online really work and behave. So how do you convince them to allocate more money for something when they can't tangibly see it?
It's an education process. It really is. I mean, look, we're in the footholds of what you call the digital evolution, the fourth industrial revolution. We're in the footholds. So this is going to be, unfortunately, trial and error, but it is an education process. A lot more does need to be done.
But what do you need to educate not just your clients, but, you know, politicians about specifically?
Yeah, I mean, number one, there's a difference between security and privacy. What Silicon Valley and others are dealing with is a swarm of security, privacy, compliance, and it has been seen in silos historically. Now you're starting to see it all come together, and to educate them, it's how technology works, what these platforms are doing, and how they're supposed to be protecting information. Disclosure is the biggest issue.
I want to talk to you about the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, about to go into effect across the EU. What is that exactly, and how could the U.S. replicate it?
Sure. So the GDPR is, like you said, General Data Protection Regulation, really focused on the information of EU data subjects, the citizens there. But it doesn't have to be an EU-based organization. It's any company that handles data, processes data, monitors data of an EU citizen is going to fall under this. U.S. companies, for example, need to wake up. Companies across the globe need to wake up. If you're selling something to an EU citizen, you're shipping something, you're collecting their email because they're visiting your website, you are going to fall under these new regulations about how you protect data, how are you getting consent to buy into it, how are you transporting that data, and it gives citizens some rights to actually want their data removed and things like that. It's interesting, just what we've seen over the past couple of days. I think the U.S. will follow that. I think it's inevitable to have more regulation around privacy, but going back to the comment you made before, is that security and privacy. We hear a lot about regulation and security. that gets scary. Technology changes so quickly. Right. Can you really say, here's the minimum standards that you need, have these controls in place when tomorrow it's obsolete?
I think that was Senator Warner's point as well. We have programs in place for a technology of decades ago,
right?
Really. So if you're saying this is a step in the right direction, folks need to be convinced of how serious this is, and the EU model may be adapted slightly. There are some limitations to that. I was speaking to someone yesterday who wants their data removed from Google. They are an American, but they have to go to basically a European court to make the case to get their information removed. Just talk to us about what the limitations may be on something like that.
I mean, the limitations that we see, the process is tough, but the biggest limitation, and it's easier said than done, is identifying the data. If you're a large organization, I'm saying this from the organization's point of view, to identify what you're holding, to classify it as sensitive information, and to be able to track it and find out where it is, very difficult. You think about an organization, they're taking information from a third-party payment processor for credit cards. Mm-hmm. Then they're taking information on an address to ship something. Plus they're getting email addresses because they're collecting information. Now how do you go back and find all of those different bits of information and then delete it? So the burden is really on the organization to get a process in place.
How are folks in Silicon Valley reacting to this whole discussion? Because when you say, okay, you need to figure out where the data is and who owns it, don't these companies now have a greater responsibility? As we saw Zuckerberg get grilled about who owns the data, where is it, can you verify it gets deleted or copied?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's Silicon Valley, and then there is even the rest of the US. There's corporate America. First, corporate America needs to wake up that if they have EU data, they're going to have to abide by this. So that's one thing that I think a lot of companies aren't realizing until lately. In Silicon Valley, the data privacy and the control of that and the identification of that has to now be embedded in the development, in their operations, in the entire life cycle. That's going to be a shift. You know, where I get most concerned is the startups in Silicon Valley, right? VC money going into companies, quick go-to-market strategy, but is security and privacy being embedded in the development? And I think that's where you're going to start seeing a shift in Silicon Valley to create security and privacy earlier on in the process.
And the shift you're saying is happening now. These are the early stages.
I think even in the past couple of days, it's been an extreme wake-up call.
Yeah. Anthony D'Agostino, great to chat with you. Hear your message to corporate America. Wake up.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.